Today, I'm not only going to talk about the world's greatest problem, I'll actually demonstrate it for you as well, right here from the stage. But before I do so, let me tell you who I am. I'm both a qualified doctor and a serial tech entrepreneur. And this unusual combination of skills is exactly the reason to how and why I was able to see this problem at first, and why, once I've seen the problem, it became my life mission to try and solve it. And I'll take you back to the first day I saw this problem for the first time. This is 4 years ago. I was the head of innovation at the largest private hospital chain in Scandinavia. Here, I was in charge of creating technology to improve the healthcare services of the hospital at the same time as I was working as a doctor and basically repairing humans. And one day, I had a patient who came to see me because he was suffering from sleep problems, concentration issues, the feeling of always being on and feeling unable to unplug mentally. I'd seen many patients like that before, and typically what I used to do was to treat them with sleeping pills, advice about being more mentally restitutional in their everyday life, like mindfulness or meditation. But sometimes, if the problems persisted, I would even refer them to a psychologist to get more help. But this day, something else happened. See, after having talked to the patient, I reached out for my prescription pad, just about to write the sleeping pills. But the moment I did that, I came to think of something that had happened the day before. Here, I had been in a meeting where we had invited a software design company to come and help us design our new app that we were building. And they used a phrase which caught my attention and made me worried. Because they said, hey, we can design your app and make it so addictive that more people will start using it for a longer time and more frequently, like something to brag about. And that worried me because I'm a doctor and no one should do something more than they want to unless they choose to do it. And the moment I reached out for this prescription pad, I came to think of that maybe these symptoms that I'm trying to actually treat, they may be the exact result of apps being used as intended. Because if you think about it, what is it that this thing runs off? Obviously electricity, right? You need to charge it to make it work. But once it's fully charged, what's the resource that actually makes anything happen on your phone? It's you. People looking, clicking, swiping, constantly using your mental resources, which are limited, to make anything happen on the phone. And when are you done using your phone? Never, right? So you walk around with a device always on you, always with you, that runs entirely on your mental resources. What do you think will happen the day you lose control? Sleeping problems, concentration issues, the feeling of always being on and feeling unable to unplug mentally. And with that in mind, I wrote a different prescription that day. Instead of sleeping pills, I told him to charge his phone outside of his bedroom. Instead of mindfulness and meditation, I told him to switch off all notifications from his apps. And instead of referring him to a psychologist, I told him to stay away from all apps that created feelings in him. At first, he was surprised. He hadn't seen a prescription like that before. But a couple of days later, he actually sent me a thank you email and told me that his symptoms were now in recovery. This made me think, because at this time, I was probably, and most likely, the only doctor on the planet who had ever written a prescription like that. But what it also meant was that smartphones being used without proper control could actually harm people. And this harm would go completely unnoticed because doctors they don't know about technology. They know about humans. And by coincidence, a couple of days later, at home, my 7-year-old daughter came home and asked me innocently, Daddy, can I have a smartphone? And of course, I said, no way to start with. But then I came to think about it. What about the day I can't say no anymore? What about the day my daughter starts using her apps as much as possible, for as long as possible, without control? What will happen to her? How can I make sure that she doesn't get harmed by these kind of addictive apps? And that became my life mission. Because now I'm looking to find the answer for the most burning question that affects everyone, also everyone in here. Are smartphones good for us? Or more importantly, are they healthy for us? So this is how it all began. Let's now talk about the problem. How many of you in here think that you use your smartphones way more than you should? I thought so. See, but this is not the problem. The real problem is that you don't know how much you exactly use your phone. And what does this usage even mean for you? How does it affect your life quality, your ability to think, to care for yourself, to care for others? We don't know that. But to better understand the potential consequences of putting smartphones in the hand of people with old brains, let's take a look at how this brain has evolved. See, first, the yellow part, that's the most primitive part of your brain. That's the reptilian brain. It came first. So the primary mission for this brain was to survive, basically. That's the most important thing your brain has to do. And survival, that was accomplished by creating fast reflexes, instincts, and a strong do what feels good right now behavior, because at that time, the future, you wouldn't maybe even survive to experience the future. Later on, we developed what we can call the emotional brain as a result of humans needing humans. Pair bonding and forming groups increased the likelihood of survival even more. And we basically started caring for each other. But having to look for other people, look out for them, you needed some more advanced skills than a just do-it brain. And therefore, we developed the thinking brain. That's the blue parts. So the thinking brain is what creates our ability to analyze, learn, plan, remember, but most importantly, it's also the part of our brain that can control the primitive parts long enough for us to actually accomplish future goals, both for us and for our loved ones. And this is the reason, these three parts are the reason to why human behavior can be categorized in three fundamental different ways. We think, we feel, and we react. And even though we have chosen to define ourselves as Homo sapiens, which, as you probably know, means the wise man, neuroscience tells us that the thoughts, the thinking processes accounts for maybe 10% of our common behavior in our everyday life. And calling Homo sapiens humans wise men is just as accurate as calling this glass empty. So to better understand what actually drives our behavior, we need to understand the things below the line. And to understand the things that goes on when you're living but not thinking, you need to learn about two important brain chemicals. And actually, I'll demonstrate them for you. See, the first brain chemical that you need to learn about is the thing called oxytocin. I want to demonstrate it by asking you to close your eyes and hold hands with the person sitting next to you. Close your eyes and hold hands, just the hands. See, with closed eyes, this feeling of not being alone, that's the core. That's what humanity is about. Because if you hadn't experienced this the first moment you opened your eyes when you were born, you wouldn't have survived, because the world would be a horrific place. Open your eyes again. See, this is the core feeling when you love someone, when you trust someone. Relationships are built on oxytocin. So that's pretty important. Let me introduce you for another hormone, a neurotransmitter, which is called dopamine. And that is driven mainly by things like sex, drugs, and rock and roll. And to demonstrate that, you have to get naked. Okay, that was a joke. But it was also a demonstration, because dopamine is released every time something feels good, tastes good, sounds good, is funny, entertaining. And just like the 5-year-old kid that gets a swing from his mom, and the second after says again, your brain right now, because I told you a joke, wants another joke, right? Because that was dopamine. But this is a serious talk, right? And I'm a doctor, I'm not a comedian, so I'm not going to tell any more jokes. So these two hormones drive the 90% behavior most of the time. This means that we react to impulses, emotions, out of conscious control. Let's see what happens when we put this brain into a world filled with smartphones. So what do we use our smartphones for? We can use these apps, right? We can use our thinking brain to use thinking apps to get better at crunching data, remembering stuff, analyzing stuff, and other things like that. You don't get addicted to a calculator. If you do, we can make an appointment afterwards. But see, you can also define other apps, like these apps, social media apps, that were supposed to create oxytocin, because that was relationships, right? And then feel-good chemicals are also released by these kind of apps. So this is how it was supposed to be, but that's not how it is. Because today, modern tech giants, their size can be compared to the one of nations. But how did they get so big? Was that by creating thinking apps, oxytocin apps, or dopamine apps? Well, let's try it out. So I've made an app, and I want you guys to use it for like 100 times a day. How many want to download it? 1. Okay, that's because your thinking brain told you 100 times that's way too much. So you wouldn't download it. Let me tell you what's in it for you, because that's what probably could convince you. So this app will probably, or most likely, make you click a lot of time on it. It'll provide you with red dots. You'll click, and then you'll come into My App. Here you'll see mostly advertisements, but most of the time, sometimes you'll see maybe some cat videos, and often you'll just waste your time. Would you download it now? Okay, only a couple of persons, right? Okay, so how many downloaded Facebook? How many use Facebook? Oh, so you already did download that app. See, why did you do that? It's because you didn't use your thinking brain. And that's how these companies have gotten so big. And just like you wouldn't download my app if you have used your thinking brain, how did you get to use your apps like that without conscious choice? So that's a really good question. How do you make apps that people use without choice? Remember the question and the answer to the patient? To avoid getting to a psychologist, avoid apps that create feelings. Why? Because if you design an app to provide specific feelings in specific conditions for specific settings, then you can create and change behavior. And when you start changing behavior, what you can actually do is turn your smartphone into a human remote control that can basically switch conscious choices into habits or impulsive behavior. That's how easy it is to change humanity. And just to make you understand how big a problem this is, actually the biggest problem in the world, as I said, I'll demonstrate it for you. So what I want you to do now is close your eyes and just for 20 seconds, focus on the people that matters the most to you. The people you would do anything in the world for. 20 seconds, think about them, starting from now. Pretty difficult, right? And there you have it. The world's greatest problem today are the 6 billion smartphones currently being used as weapons of mass distraction. Because the moment people stop analyzing, learning, planning, and can't do it anymore, they won't be able to control the primitive parts of their brain and accomplish future goals, and they will certainly not be able to solve any other problems as well. So what's the solution? See, the solution is double-sided. We have 2 ways to deal with this. First of all, what we need to do is to make 5 people understand the magnitude of the problem and the responsibility they hold. That's the CEOs of the companies Microsoft, Apple, Google, Facebook, and Amazon. What we want them to do, what I want them to do, is to understand the messages from this book, because when they read it and understand it, they'll find themselves not being in the tech industry anymore. They're actually working in the healthcare industry without permit. Because their products impact more than 2 billion people every single day, even more than that. And they impact it, but they don't know how the impact is yet. I've studied more than 200 scientific articles on this impact, and we need to change that. They need to realize that sending technology out without any specific care for the patient that's in front of you doesn't do good. We can't build companies based on distraction. We can't build companies based on addictive design, because then you take the free choice out of people's lives. If you create technology like that, what you get is actually an incentive that puts you in direct competition with people being in control of their own lives. That's one thing they need to do. The other thing they should do was actually to learn about people even more, use that knowledge they have about the 90% behavior, and use that to help people reach their conscious choices. If you want to get better, they should use you and help you to reach that goal. Because if you can make 2 billion people look at your product every single day, you could also use that power to make people look at their kids, their families, their jobs every single day. Finally, they should also, because now being in the healthcare industry, they should form an independent research facility that looked deeply into the impact of their products on people, and then they should follow the guidelines so that they started making technology great again. And final piece of advice to you guys watching this talk: next time you pull out your phone from your pocket, ask yourself this question: was it a choice? Was it a habit? Or was it an impulse? Because the answer to that question is the answer to who's controlling your life. And if you believe in this vision of living in a world where technology is being used by humans to create better humans, instead of tech companies using humans just to form larger companies, I really hope that you'll find this idea worth spreading. Thank you.